result of the fact that I asked you to move, whether you moved or not. Oh, as a result of me asking you to move, write down the emotion that you're experiencing.
Glad I'm on my own.
And then after you write down the emotion that you're experiencing, you're going to write down some of the thoughts that you're having. So you'll write down the emotion that you're experiencing as a result of me asking you to move. And then you're going to write down some of the thoughts that are going through your head. Go ahead and finish up your thoughts. You can get all of your thoughts out. And now we're going to go ahead and read the translations. Start with verse 40.
Wait, what are our numbers today?
48
Through what?
48 through 119.
Okay.
All right, and to begin the verses, we're going to start in the back. So
I'll just switch up.
Start in the back with Kuti.
Yeah, 48. I don't know.
We'll just do 48 through 119.
Okay,
Yeah, we're going to read the translation. Just like
we're going through to a different chapter too.
Yeah, we're going to a different chapter.
Okay.
So Kuti, go ahead and start.
The goodness of the Lord are so forbearing that even though there is a king chiefly cursed, the spirit is filled. There are never inclined to intentions.
Whoa.
Generally, the translation
Text 49.
generally the translation is even
Oh,
though
this.
The one before.
okay. This age thus repeated the sin committed by his own son. He did not take the insult paid by the king very seriously.
Generally, the translation says, even though it indicates that others and the qualities of the tree are not strict, nor do they keep pleasure with oath, for they are temple.
Sri Suti Goswami said, while returning home, the King Maharaj Parikshit felt that the act he committed against the faultless and powerful Brahmana was heinous and uncivilized. Consequently, he was distressed.
Encouraging thought, due to my neglecting the injunctions of the Supreme Lord, I must certainly expect some difficulties to overcome them. I now desire without reservation that the calamity come now, for in this way I can be free from of the sinful action and not commit questionable again.
I once
civilized and simple by neglect and dominant culture. God consciousness and cap protection, therefore I wish that my kingdom, strength and riches burn up by the fire of the ground wrath, so that sure I may not be guided by such inauspicious acts.
The chant. Quick Sanskrit tip for any of those who are interested in Sanskrit. I'm by no means an expert, but something that you can do is in the back of every big book, there's actually a Sanskrit pronunciation guide. And something that I like to do as a fun game is I'll take one, and when I do my personal reading, I'll read the verses out loud, and I'll try to get just that one right. So today, the Sanskrit that I'm going to, the little Sanskrit tip that I'm going to give you is anytime an S has a marking under or over it, it's a sh. Anytime the S is naked, it's a s. So try to pay attention to that today. Tiraskrita vipralabdha.
Tiraskrita Vipalada.
Shikta hata api.
Shapta Shikta Hatari.
Nasyatat pratipurvanti.
Nasita Pratipurvanti.
Tavata prabhavokihi.
Tavata Prabhupada.
Tiraskrita vipralabdha.
Tiraskrita Vipalada.
Shakta shikta hata api.
Shapta Shikta Hatari.
Nasyatat pratipurvanti.
Nasita Pratipurvanti.
Tavata prabhavokihi.
Tavata Prabhupada.
Tiraskrita vipralabdha.
Tiraskrita
Shakta shikta hata api.
Shapta Shikta Hatari.
Nasyatat pratipurvanti.
Nasita Pratipurvanti.
Tavata prabhavokihi.
Tavata Prabhupada.
All right, so we're going to try this again today. Are we ready? So we're going to try to do the Sanskrit line by line. We're going to switch off side by side. And when we get to the back, we're going to move to the statement. Back here. Are you ready? Can we do this one today? All right.
Yes.
Who'd like to start? All right. Oh yeah, let's start in the front just to make it easy.
Tirashakta Prabhava.
Nasyata pratikurvanti.
Nasita Pratikurvanti.
Sarvata prabhavokihi.
Tavata Prabhupada. Tiraskrita Vipaladvya.
Tiraskrita vipralabdha.
Shabda Shikta Hatari.
Nasyatat pratikurvanti.
Nasita Pratikurvanti. Tavata Prabhupada.
Tiraskrita vipralabdha.
Tiraskrita vipralabdha. Shakta shikta hatapi.
Nasyatat pratipurvanti.
Nasyatat pratipurvanti.
Tavata Prabhupada.
Tiraskrita vipralabdha.
Tiraskrita vipralabdha.
Shapta shikta hatapi.
Shakta shikta hatapi.
Nasyatat pratipurvanti.
Nasyatat pratipurvanti. Tavata prabhavokihi. Jackson, the whole verse.
Shirashritya Vipalabha
Shirashritya Vipalabha
Shaptashita Hatapi
Saptashita Hatapi
Nasya Pratapati Kuranti
Nasya Tapati Kurvanti
Tatpata Prabhavopi
Tavata Ragavopi.
We did it! Let's go ahead and do the word for today. Tiadrita Vijay, Vipralabha Vijay, Shaktaha Vijay, Shiftaha deserved by next. Hataha Api also, Na, never, Asya, all these acts, Tata, then, Prativirvanti, counteract, Tata, the Lord, Bhakta, devotees, Prabhava, powerful, Api, although, E, certainly. Let's go ahead and read this together. The devotees of the Lord are so forbearing, and even though they are defamed, cheated, cursed, disturbed, neglected, or even killed, they are never inclined to avenge themselves. Let's actually read that again. One more time. The devotees of the Lord are so forbearing, that even though they are defamed, cheated, cursed, disturbed, neglected, or even killed, they are never inclined to avenge themselves. One more time. The devotees of the Lord are so forbearing that even though they are defamed, cheated, cursed, disturbed, neglected, or even killed, they are never inclined to avenge themselves. Who would like to read our word?
Rishi Samika also knew that the Lord does not forgive a person who has committed an offense at the feet of a devotee. The Lord can only give direction to take shelter of the devotee. He thought with himself that if Maharaj Bhikshu would counter-curse the boy, he might be saved. But he knew also that a pure devotee is callous about worldly advantages or reverses. As such, the devotees are never inclined to counteract personal defamation, curses, negligence, etc. As far as such things are concerned in personal affairs, devotees do not care for them. But in the case of their being performed against the Lord and his devotees, then the devotees take very strong action. It was a personal affair, and therefore Shamika Rishi knew that the king would not take counteraction. Thus there was no alternative than to place an appeal to the Lord, the immature boy. It is not that only the brahmanas are powerful enough to award curses or blessings upon the subordinates. The devotee of the Lord, even though he may not be a brahmana, is more powerful than a brahmana. But a powerful devotee never misuses the power for personal benefit. Whatever power the devotee may have is always utilized in service towards the Lord and his devotees only.
Oh my God, it's been on the sad lunch. So this is quite a story, right? We are entering into the age of Kali Yuga because somebody, an innocent actually, utilized his negative emotions for power. And as a result of that, the final pious king of the beginning of the age of Kali Yuga is going to die. And what we're seeing in these verses is we are seeing the high values and the high morals and the high capacity for action that these pure devotees have. And what I want to do before we get deeper into that is I just want to talk about the sadhus that have brought us here. So we started chapter 18 with Madhava, and one of the things that he said that really struck me was that the age of Kali is awkward unless we are operating from the platform of reality. And then we had our Sadhu Janprabhu, who told us that devotees at their heart are, what matters is not what is on the outside, it's not our tilak, it's not our dress, it's what's on the inside. And devotees uplift other people. Then we had Kalakanta, and Kalakanta talked about how the way to deal with anger is to realize that the anger is something you're experiencing, it is not you, and the way to handle it is actually to move yourself into the actions which will build relationships with others. And then we had our Sadhu Nekrapur, who brought us into the realization that when we act from these lower behaviors, when we act from these lower emotions, it brings us further away from Krishna, not closer to him. And then yesterday we had Jackson combined all of these extraordinary gold nuggets, one of which being that when we take offense or when we give offense, we lose our taste for chanting the holy name, we lose our taste for devotional service. And so I feel like this verse is the culmination of all of that teaching, right? The devotees of the Lord are so forbearing that even though they are defamed, cheated, cursed, disturbed, neglected, or even killed, they are never inclined to avenge themselves. And so the word that's really important in this particular translation is forbearance. Does anybody know what the word forbearance means?
Like bearing himself.
No, but thank you for trying.
A synonym would be tolerance. I don't know how they're different, but
Yeah, we'll get into it. You're very close. Yeah. Bruce?
Does it have something to do with foreshadowing?
No. But I can see how you think that based on the etymology of it. So the definition of forbearance is patience and restraint. So patience and restraint is forbearance. And so when you look at this, defamed, cheated, cursed, disturbed, neglected, or even killed, they're never inclined to defend themselves because they are forbearing. And I think as we have been going through these previous lectures, one of the big points for me is that what takes away our patience is when we are operating in the wrong reality. So if we go back to Madhava's point that realists are those that operate in reality, reality is what gives us the capacity for forbearance. And so which then gives us the capacity to act at the highest possible levels. And so what I want you to do now is grab another card, or if you have your own note-taking devices, you can do that as well. But I want you to write down a very minor time. So we're going to talk about minor things. Don't talk about like the worst thing that's ever happened to you. But on those cards in front of you, write down a time where you have been offended. Just write down a time where you've been offended. Write down what the person did. Start there. So what did the person do that offended you?
My question I have.
Yeah.
In this context, what the meaning of avenge themselves?
So they don't take revenge, right? So they're not inclined to be like, okay, so here's an example I can give you. This morning I asked everybody to get up and change their seat, right? And those devotees are so patient and forbearing that nobody cursed at me, right? Nobody wished that nobody else was like, no, you can't do that. That's not how top classes work. Like everybody just did it, with a few exceptions. Yeah. So again, what we're doing now is go ahead and just write down the time that you've been offended and what the person did. What happened? And then after you write down what the person did, I want you to write down how what the person did made you feel. And then following that emotion, I want you to write down the story that you told yourself about that person. So this person did something, you had an emotion about it, you probably told a story about the person. So what story did you tell about that person in this moment?
What story did we told ourselves?
Yeah, what story inside? So like, I'll give you an example. So someone cuts you off in traffic, right? Someone cuts you off while you're driving, and the emotion maybe that you feel is fear. And the story that you tell is that person's a jerk for cutting you off. Okay? So you get cut off in traffic, you have an emotion of fear, and you say that person's a jerk.
Story we tell ourselves.
The story we tell ourselves about that person based on the action. So as you're finishing that up, you're welcome to keep writing. I'm gonna just tell you a little story, and this story is about me at the plates table. So I broke my foot, as some of you know, and the result of that was that I ended up at the plates table. Now there's the true story of my trajectory through the plates table, and then there's the story of interpretation that happened. So the true story of the plates table is I broke my foot. The plates table was where I got assigned. The job of the plates table is to stack plates and forks, to give those plates and forks and take tickets, to answer questions, to say hello to the guests, and that's it. That's the plates table. So when I first got assigned to the plates table, I was okay. I was like, all right, this is good. You know, I had a positive emotion. And the story that I told was like, this is a really good thing. And then about 3 weeks into plates table, I was like, oh my God, I'm so bored. I'm so bored. I was like, I'm so much more qualified to do anything else other than this. I have a master's degree. Like, what am I doing here? And then John would assign people to like let people go to the Kirtan station, right? And in my head, I was like, oh, why didn't John assign me to go to the Kirtan station? Oh, my voice is terrible. He doesn't like me. And then I would get jealous of the people at the Kirtan station. I'd be like, oh my God, they've been there forever. They've been there forever. And I just have to sit here and stack plates and say hello to people. So you can see, I was in this state for a while at the plates table. I was in these states of low emotions, right? These low emotions, boredom, envy, pride. And from those low emotions, the stories that I was telling were fun, they were interesting, but ultimately they were not that of a period at all, right? And of course, all this was going on in general, probably no one probably what's going on. Okay.
You may have the same.
Yeah. But then there was this moment where I started to tap into the truth. The truth is what Maharaj Parikshit and Shamakya Rishi displayed in some of these verses. So I want to talk a little bit about their actions in the context of this verse. So we have this story where Maharaj Parikshit put a snake on the shoulders of Shamakya, and Shamakya Rishi and both Maharaj Parikshit are very high-level devotees. And what was their response? How did they respond to this? Let's talk about Maharaj Parikshit. How did he respond? He said, it's my fault. How else did he respond?
Yeah, he accepted it and took it as an opportunity to perfect his life.
So he accepted it and he took it as an opportunity to perfect his life. How else did he respond?
Remorse.
With remorse and regret. How else did he respond? It's 1 in 5.
He took shelter of the
So he is operating from the absolute truth. And what I'm curious to mine out of his action is, what is the absolute truth? What is the truth about what happened in the situation?
There are some things that are beyond our control.
There are things that are beyond our control. Certainly true. What are some other truths from which Parikshit is acting?
He was trying to think of the perspective that Krishna seemed on the situation. Like, what was Krishna's emotions?
Right, so he was thinking, what was Krishna? What's Krishna's central, like what was Krishna doing for me in this situation? Yeah.
Others are not to blame for our actions.
Right. There's nobody to blame, yet others for our actions.
My kingdom and my body are temporary, but my soul is eternal, and let me seek the absolute truth by taking shelter of one who knows the absolute truth.
So this body, this soul, they're temporary. So let me take shelter of that which is eternal.
There was a major lack of communication between Parikshit and the Rishi and his son, and Parikshit and Shringi.
Yeah, so I think the thing that's interesting about the communication is there was no communication between anybody, right? So nobody talked, and yet still Parikshit forgave. He did not need Shringi to apologize, right? He didn't need to like talk it over with Shringi and be like, hey, let's sit down and talk about what happened. He just forgave. And so when we're working with things like forbearance, when we're working things like forgiveness, the truth is the foundation upon which these things are possible. And the truth is different than our interpretation. So when I go back to my story of being in the plates table, the truth was I broke my foot. The only place where I could really be was the plates table. The plates table involves stacking forks and plates, saying hello to the guests. But I wasn't operating from the absolute truth. And the absolute truth is that, as Gopal was saying, I can't place blame on anybody. Nobody is a victim. I'm not a victim of the circumstance, right? And as Shantanu was saying, everything is coordinated by Krishna. And there was a point at which, after I flowed through all of my lower emotions, I started to really understand that. I started to really accept, as Shambhak was saying, right, accept that me being at the plates table was exactly where I was meant to be, because that was Krishna's design and plan for my higher. And so I had this one glorious day where I was just looking at everyone and everything. It's like, that blade of grass is Krishna. This person standing in front of me is Krishna. These plates and forks were made by somebody who was channeling Krishna. And like, my job is to make people feel amazing when they come through this line, so that when they take the Lord's prasadam, they're taking it in with full, open, happy hearts. Because before they get into that line, they're stressed out by school, they're stressed out by relationships, they're stressed out by, figuring out where they're trying to go in their lives. And so what happened was, when I started to operate from the absolute truth, I stopped blaming John. Sorry, John.
That's my story.
Yeah, seriously, I believe it. I stopped being envious of people when they would go to kirtan. I stopped focusing my attention on the things which those lower emotions were wanting me to focus on. And I just started focusing on having as much fun as I could have at the place table. So I started memorizing people's names. I started really trying to know people's stories. I tried to make sure I made eye contact with every single person that came through the line. And there was a point at which, I just felt peace at the place table. And even sometimes a little bit of joy. And what started to happen is I started to notice that, people coming through the line were appreciative of that joy. They were appreciative of that. And I'm hoping, I don't know for sure, I'm hoping that it went through and infused their experience of receiving Lord's prasadam. And maybe someday, there's a little seed planted in each and every one of those, anywhere from 300 to 500 through a day, who might someday take up the chance. So what I want you to do now is I want you to take a look at your two cards that you have created today. And I want you to take a look at the emotions that you experienced. So both the emotion that you experienced when I asked you to move your seat, right, which was a minor offense for tolerating. And I also want you to take a look at the emotion that you experienced when you experienced an offense. And what I would like for you to do, I'm going to give you a few moments, we'll just sit in silence, is I want you to rewrite your story. I want you to take a moment and I want you to take a look at what happened. So remember, what happened is a very neutral thing. So someone said something to you, someone did something. It's very neutral, right? I sat at the plates table. The job of the plates table is to stack plates. Very neutral. And you're going to look at your emotion And you're gonna exercise forbearance, which is you're gonna be patient with it, and you're gonna restrain yourself from retelling the first story already told. And then you're gonna write a new story based on the absolute truth, which is that Krishna coordinates absolutely everything for our highest good. We cannot blame others for how we feel, and nobody is a victim. So go ahead and take some time to rewrite your story.
What if we like the story?
You can keep it, but think about why you're doing it.
I'm attached.
Yeah, when you're attached to the story, take some time to reflect on why you're attached to that story and why you can't let it
I don't even know what's I don't know what.
go. Yeah, that's okay too. You can write, I don't know. There's no right answers here. It's just an exercise.
I don't think I'm attached, I'm just like it. Why I'm liking it?
Yeah, talk about why you like it.
Okay.
Talk about why you're going to
Because
about
I'm right. Absolute truth. Objectively.
It was.
So if you're still writing, you can write your thoughts. But now I want you to take a look. I just want you to take a look at the stories, the two stories that you have. There's the story based on the emotion of offense, and then there's the rewritten story based on the truth. And I'm just curious, which story do you think is going to bring you closer to Krishna? You don't have to answer that. It's like one of, it's like one of,
Um, definitely the second one, but it was hard to write the second
tell me why.
one. Just because I'm like, you're sugarcoating this. They were actually, yeah.
Right. So when you have that, do you mind if I
Please.
if I poke you?
Yeah.
So you're still in the state of blame. So the state of blame is a lower vibrational frequency, right? You still want that person to be wrong. You still want to be a victim, right? Because one of the things that we hear quite often in these classes is that one of the reasons why we're here is because we want to be the hero of the story. And so something that we do with our internal stories when we're offended or when we are experiencing discomfort is what we do is we shift our story to make ourselves the hero. But in order to make ourselves the hero, what happens to the other person?
The villain.
They become the villain. Exactly. Which is an offense. Right? When you make someone else a villain, that is an offense to that person. So it's hard because we are in the inertia, right? So for millions of lifetimes, we've been making ourselves the hero. So we don't want to, because we don't want to come out of that stance that we're the hero. But who's the hero of the story? It's Krishna. And what does Krishna want from us?
Relationship.
Love, relationship. And what does he want between his devotees?
Connection.
Cooperation. And cooperation. And reconciliation. And so when you're experiencing that, I want to say it's completely normal. I want to say that there's nothing wrong with you. I want to say that you're exactly where you are, and that's perfect, because that's where Krishna has you. But it's an opportunity. So that little bit of like, I still want that other story to be true. You can see it as an opportunity for growth. And you can see the other story as that growth edge, to be like, how do I get to this story in a way where it actually feels correct? And we know that the biggest strategy, actually Bill who mentioned this yesterday about Shastri, it's amazing. The biggest strategy to get where Krishna is at the center is to make no offenses and chant Hare Krishna. When we can't do that, we can recognize our stories, because I mean, this is a culture, right? So we talk about how bhakti is a culture, and it's a culture of stories, right? Everything in this is based off of stories. It's based off of loving stories of Krishna and loving stories of Krishna's associates. But I think it's also about loving your own story in relationship to Krishna. And when your story is in alignment with Krishna's story, that is when you will love it. And that's when you will love everyone else as well. And so there's this opportunity in these hard stories to get closer and closer to the truth. How many of you know the 7 purposes of ISKCON? Some of you. Who knows the first one? Close, propagate. Yeah. Okay, so it's to systematically propagate spiritual knowledge to society at large and to educate all people in the techniques of spiritual life in order to check the imbalance of values in life and to achieve real peace and unity in the world. So when you think about ISKCON, in relationship to these higher values, what we're trying to do is we're trying to create world peace. Sometimes we talk about how what we're doing here, it seems unrelated to the larger world. It seems disconnected from the larger world. But this is a world peace organization. We're here to create peace, and we're here to create unity. And the foundation upon which that can occur is when we create peace and unity within ourselves. And who are we? Really, when you dig down to the essential aspect, who are we?
Spirit soul.
We are spirit souls. And what are we here to do?
Serve Krishna.
Very good, thank you. Then he's out, I like that. We are the servants of 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 Krishna. We are a small aspect of him, and it is our job to create peace and unity within ourselves. And so when we are engaged in play, when we are working from these lower emotions, how many of you feel whole when you're working from these lower emotions? How many of you feel peaceful when you're working from these lower emotions? Yeah, Shantanu is giving me a thumbs down. Right? So the idea of the example of Parikshit and the example of Shamika Rishi is that when we remember the absolute truth, when we remember Krishna, when we make Krishna the hero of the story, we remember that we can't actually ever blame anybody for what's happening to us. Because the reason why anything is ever happening to us is our fault. We chose to be there. We chose to turn away from Krishna. And so the solution is to keep turning toward Krishna, to turn towards his instructions, to turn toward love, to turn away from offense. And that is what we can learn from the way that Krishna says, I'm to blame. I take full responsibility, and I want to take it now so it doesn't affect other people. And I'm going to forgive. And I'm going to regret what I did so that I don't do it again. So I'm going to open up for questions, comments, feelings. Okay, good? No, Arvind, please.
That's a really good introduction you given about this thing. I really like the way of getting what the feeling you have and what after thinking about Lord Krishna, what is other feeling. It's really good exercise. But one question I basically have is, okay, what you've done is okay, but you don't take it offensive. But is that right? If somebody is doing voluntary multiple times, still we need to be quiet, or should we teach a lesson to them? Because Lord Krishna says that even the Lord Krishna said, like even it will be like his own his own uncle, right? Because he waited for 100 problems, for 100 wrong things. After 100 is done, he killed him. So we should follow. So what Krishna also told that if somebody does voluntarily multiple times and is hurting you, should we teach him a lesson or not?
It's a really good question. I'm sure many people have it. So thank you for asking. So the question is, all right, so you're sitting here and someone is committing offense after offense after offense after offense after offense. So I'm actually going to repeat an answer that was given yesterday that's in the same alignment with Vegas, which is that the high, right? So we're talking from the level of like the highest thing you can do is to take no offense. And what the second line of that, so one who thinks himself lower than a blade of grass, who is more tolerant than a tree, who does not expect personal honor and is always prepared to give all respects to others, can very easily always chant the holy name. So at the highest levels of this, yeah, you're just like, I take no offense by what's happening. Especially when it's personal. So it's a purport they talked about. So it's a personal offense, and he's not doing it to you because you're a devotee, right? So he's not persecuting you. He's like, you're a devotee of Krishna, so I'm going to punch you, right? Then it's an opportunity to develop that tolerance and patience. And at the same time, if it's abusive, right? If it is negatively impacting the entire community, the idea is you can speak up, right? The idea is to speak up, speak out, say what's going on, but without attachment to the result, right? Because you're not God. The only person who can teach us a lesson is God. And so you can speak up, speak out, stand up for yourself, make yourself safe, take your distance, take all the actions. But the idea is to have those actions happen on the platform of an open, loving heart where you can still look at that person and say, I love you because you're a piece of God too. Yeah, does that make sense? Yeah. Any other comments on that?
There was a phrase to hate the sin, not the sinner. But a few years ago, I was reframing that into a different statement, that we might disapprove the behavior, but we love the sin. And in regards to the discomfort process of reframing the narrative you paint us in exercise, there's a lot of discomfort in doing that. So the benefits, there's Gopal Senior and I, we had a discussion about these marigolds that we have been offering to Prabhupada. They're growing right here in this corner. So they are devotee grown marigolds. They don't really give any fragrance unless you squeeze them. So it's please do not take note of that. So don't just offer a squeeze a marigold. Prabhupada. So in a similar way, this discomfort that we feel, the squeezing of this conscious effort to reframe the narrative away from the victim to the one of the victor, it's really beneficial. And it's the austerity, it's pretty much the only austerity if you're looking for growth. I heard, Arunji, in regards to your question or comment,
yeah.
I heard there's a difference between, it was a Christian preacher that gave a wonderful, purport to turning the other cheek. It does not refer to accommodating abusing behavior, like, you keep coming at me. And it does not refer to teaching them the lesson, because only Krishna can teach a lesson. But it does refer to turning the other cheek it represents our ability to respond. So most people react to what's happening, good or bad. But to develop that ability to respond and express our emotions, it will it will affect other people's hearts, provided it's done sincerely. And there's nobody, it's very rare that people would ignore the genuine humility. There's something powerful.
There's a question that came to me once, which is, when have you, knowing that the other person was weaker than you, allow them to win, allow them to be right? What was the impact of that? So it's kind of in that spirit. We know when someone's doing something wrong, and sometimes the most powerful action that we can take is to love them and to allow whatever that behavior it is to run its course. Because we also maybe have experienced that ourselves, right? So these negative emotions, they're often programmed. It's like you have this program because of something that happened to you in your childhood or because of something that happened in your life. And once the program turns on, right? So once the negative emotion is triggered, like you're in it. I don't know if you've ever had this experience where you're in it and you can see yourself in it and you're like, no, not again. I have this place table with me the whole time. Like I was in the emotions and I was outside of the emotions witnessing them. And, you know, I needed John's forbearance. You know, I needed that ability to let them run so that they could run their course fully. And in letting them run their course fully, that's when, after they were done, you know, obviously it would have been nice to be able to pull out early if we could. But with John's forbearance, with patience, you know, with restraint, because I didn't let any of those things out, right? I restrained what I was feeling and kept it inside. But with that patience, with that restraint, eventually I was able to get to the truth. So I believe we are out of time. I want to thank you all for your forbearance with this, because I'm unqualified